Today we are going to make a modified cap and squish mold because it's one of the best molds for putting things inside of your dice. If you have something really big that you want to put in, or if you want to do a specific kind of a pour. I just want to say that I dislike cap and squish molds just because of the extra flashing that they leave, and sometimes your face sticks up a little bit farther if you don't do it just right, or leaving holes from bubbles because there's nowhere for the air to go. I've seen done with PVC pipe, using tape and gems for the keys, as well as just using a container and putty and sticking it on the bottom of the container and then cutting out the excess on the face. But I'm going to try and put all of the methods together, or at least the parts of the methods that I like. And mine's going to be a hybrid, of course, because I'm going to put sprues in them so there's somewhere for the air to go and excess resin rather than just smushing it out the sides. So I decide to make my own container with the keys built into it, and then I'm just going to 3D print that, and then I can just easily create my mold in 2 parts. So I have my keyed container printed, and now all I need to do is get some tape, preferably wide enough to go over the whole thing without having to use 2 different strips. So I'll get 1 strip, put it with the sticky side up, and then put my container with the keys on the bottom down onto that, and then push firmly around the outside to make sure that it sticks well. And it is already on my tray, so I don't have to move it, so I'm not going to have to use any hot glue on the edges. It will stay just fine. And then I'll take my dice, and I like to put them with the high number on the top. That way when you're filling, they will be in the bottom. The D10 isn't exactly where I want it, but it will still work. So once they're all in there, just make sure that each of the faces is stuck well to the tape and that they aren't touching, and it should be ready to fill with our silicone. I have some leftover Dragon Skin 20 that I'm going to use because it doesn't matter how elastic it is. It will be coming out of the entire face rather than a small cut or hole. So I mix up my silicone in equal parts of A and B. Wasn't entirely sure how much it would use, so I made too much, but that's okay. With this container, you can fill it all the way to the top. The model for this container is available for my patrons if you want to make your own cap molds with or without sprues. Thank you so much, patrons, for your support. It is super appreciated. Once we get our mold filled, we'll put it in the pressure pot. And then once it's cured, we will ever so carefully remove the tape. Now this tape that I used is very strong, so you have to be really careful not to tear the edges. If you would like to show your support by becoming a patron, go to patreon.com/geekhappens, sign up and get access to my 3D files, as well as discounts at my store, 3dmtabletop.com, on dice, miniatures, scenery, and all sorts of other D&D goodies. You may have to hold down the silicone with your finger as you peel it off. Just be very careful, like I say, the edges are very thin and you don't want to tear them. Once you get the tape off, then you'll want to work around the edges to get it to separate. It is also handy to use a toothpick, stick it up in the side, and then you can just roll it around the outside edges and it will separate. Once it's separated from the container, you should be able to just push from the bottom and pop it out the top. Once it's out, you can use some tape and wrap it around to use to make your lid. I usually do only 2 wraparounds, but this one I did way too much tape. And it doesn't exactly stick very well to the sides of this because it's not super smooth because of the layer lines in the 3D print, but it holds well enough. And I also will stick it back into the container to kind of give it a little bit more support as well. The next step will be to use our petroleum jelly as a mold release, and we will put it with a Q-tip everywhere on the silicone where we don't want the new layer to stick. So everywhere but the face of the dice. If you accidentally do get some on the dice, like I do in mine, it's okay, you can use the other side of the Q-tip to wipe it off as best you can. And I did accidentally get some on my D4, so I'm going to carefully just wipe that off of the corner there. And now at this point, if you don't want to use sprues and just want to do a cap mold, you can mix up your silicone and just fill in your lid. But for mine, I'm going to mix up my silicone and then I'm going to get my little sprues that I 3D printed, and I'm going to use some accelerant with the glue to just quickly attach those, and then when I do fill in my lid, I will just fill it in to the top of those sprues. After you get your lid filled, put it back into the pressure pot so that it will be bubble free when it's cured. Once it's cured, we'll go ahead and remove the tape and then set about getting the lid separated from the body. You'll want to slowly peel the corners and the edges as best you can. The area where the keys are might be a little bit sealed, and you'll want to use a craft knife to carefully cut along those edges and get it released until it comes all the way off. You'll have to remove the sprues to get it all the way off, which is something you'll also have to take into consideration when making your dice with this type of a mold. In the long run, it will be worth it to have your faces be nice and flat. And with the dragon skin, just carefully, slowly get it to peel and separate and come all the way off. That lid looks good. So now we will carefully separate the edges of the silicone from the dice to pop out each one. The dragon skin is very stretchy, so make sure that you take the time to separate it. You might hear some suctioning and some releasing from the numbers, and once you get all those faces released, then they should be able to just pop right out. Just roll it and push from the bottom and roll, push it out. And now you have a perfectly good mold. So let's mix up some resin and try it. I'm gonna make some dice for my D&D character Jorko, who is a bronze dragonborn wizard. So I want to do a lot of bronze, a little bit of silver, maybe a speck of blue holographic, and some clear, just to kind of break it up and give it kind of a cloudy, swirly mixture of sorts. And then I'm going to randomly pour the colors into my mold. A mistake that I made that I didn't show that will come back to bite me later is I did not let the resin sit. You know, usually after I mix it, I let it sit for a little while so that the bubbles kind of go away. I just immediately started mixing. I was so excited. I just started putting it all together. And that's gonna leave a lot of bubbles in it later. But we'll go ahead and pour it in there. They look like really cool colors when they mix together. Now when you do yours, you're probably not going to just use this type of a mold to just pour resin in. You're most likely going to be 3D printing little tiny bones or different things that you can actually stick inside of it. I would say that if you do that, fill your dice about a quarter of the way first, let that set, and then put in whatever you're putting it in so that it doesn't sink to the bottom. So I get it all filled and I make sure that it sticks up a little ways. Most of the time at this point when you put your lid on, it will just smush everything out to the sides, and you want to push it down so that you get a nice flat surface. The good thing about this design, which works exactly how I wanted it to, is when I put the lid on and start squishing it down, the excess resin actually comes up through the sprue holes and does not come out the sides and make a mess. Which is also good for when you go to put it in the pressure pot, it will have somewhere for the excess resin to go to fill in any air bubbles you may have, unless you made the mistake that I did and you have way too many air bubbles to fill. I also made enough resin to make a jumbo with the rest. And once my molds are filled, I will put those in the pressure pot and let it cure for at least 12 hours. And now we're ready to pull it out. And as you can see, there is no mess, nothing out the sides, but also in my sprue holes, there is also no resin in there either, except for in the one. So for this one, I'll have a little extra work to do filling in the holes that you will see once I get the lid off. But that's not the mold's fault. The mold works exactly how I want, so I can use it for future projects. So once I get my little sprue out of there, then I'm able to get my lid off, look at my dice that have a lot of air bubble holes in them, unfortunately, but the numbers are intact, so it can be fixed. So we'll go ahead and peel off that extra flashing. And then actually the dice themselves look really good, and the faces are nice and flat. It doesn't stick up noticeably, and so it should stand out pretty well. It will work better with your dice than with my edge dice because the flashing is right on those edges, so I'll have to sand those edges and hopefully not be able to see as much the little flashing lines in those. But overall, they look much better than any of the other cat molds I've tried to make. This is by far the best. I'm still just amazed at how much better those top lid edges came out compared to any of the other cat molds that I've tried. I still prefer sprue molds, but for a cat mold, this is pretty darn good. So to finish my dice, I'm going to paint the normal numbers in blue, the maximum numbers in a wizard's orb green, and then the lowest numbers in a darker blue. I fill in the holes with a UV resin before I sand them. If you want to know how to do that, I have another video that shows you how to fix your holes in your dice, so feel free to check that out if you need to. So once I get it all done, it actually looks really good, even with the holes filled. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. If so, please like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you on our next video.